Antarctica is one of the strangest places on the face of the Earth. The continent has always been a mystery to many, particularly because it's so secluded. One of the coldest places on Earth, Antarctica is also among the most sparsely populated regions of the world. Despite the fact that it has a landmass of about 13.66 million square kilometers, less than 10,000 people live here. In fact, most of the people who stay are actually scientists and researchers. I mean, who knows what those guys could be looking for? Regardless, the mystery surrounding Antarctica has been extensive. Many people have done their best to uncover its secrets, but despite their best efforts, there is just so much that we still don't know about it. Over the past few years, however, Joe Rogan, arguably the most popular podcast host in the world, has done several deep dives into Antarctica and the continent's possible history. And I must say, his findings have been crazy. In this video, we'll be exploring Joe's discoveries about Antarctica, as well as the continent's possible links to an ancient civilization that might have existed long before we ever came along. Graham Hancock and the Ancient Civilization Theory. When it comes to discovering secrets about the Earth and possible ancient civilizations, Joe Rogan has been pretty interested. The podcaster spent a lot of his time interviewing experts who have shared different theories about anomalies discovered all across our planet, and one man who has been particularly vocal about this is Graham Hancock. Graham is a British journalist, writer, and researcher who has spent the better part of 3 decades researching proof of possible ancient civilizations around the world. He's written different books on the subject as well, gathering archaeological evidence all over. On an episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, Graham showed significant proof that Antarctica could be linked to an ancient civilization that could have walked the Earth millennia ago and left us clues. So here's a quick backstory about Antarctica. According to most sources, the continent was discovered in January 1820. At the time, an explorer named Thaddeus von Bellingshausen discovered the continent, describing it as an ice shore of extreme height. Thaddeus had been on an expedition where he explored different lands around the Antarctic, and he apparently found the continent. But there are arguments about this fact. For instance, sources confirmed that around the same time Thaddeus found this ice shore, Edward Bransfield, an officer with the Royal Navy, also reported seeing high mountains covered with snow while on a British mapping trip around the area. There are also those who believe that Captain James Cook, another British explorer, had been the first to find Antarctica. Cook and a team spent 3 years looking for the continent, traveling between 1772 to 1775. However, while they did make it into the Antarctic Circle, they reportedly called it quits after they failed to find any actual land. Regardless of what you believe, the history books do record that Antarctica was officially first discovered in the early 1800s. However, Graham Hancock has come out hard to dispute this theory. And on the Joe Rogan Experience, he gave some pretty impressive proof. To begin with, Graham shares a theory about the famous Bimini Road in the Bahamas. For those who might not know it, Bimini Road is a rock formation that's buried underwater. It was discovered close to North Bimini Islands in the Bahamas and consists of a northeast-southwest linear feature that spans about 0.8 kilometers. For that stretch, all you see are rectangular limestone blocks.
This ancient formation has caused a number of heated debates between academically funded scientific individuals and keen self-funded enthusiasts. The road is nearly 1 kilometer long.
So far, Bimini Road has caused a lot of arguments. Some claim the rocks are natural formations, but Graham doesn't believe so.
The Bimini Road is not even very deep. It's only about 20 feet deep. It was one of the last things to be covered by Ice Age sea level rise, and that's why we show a graphic, a reconstruction of it above water. It's made of extremely regular blocks, megalithic blocks, on a very large scale, more than 1,000 feet in length. When you dive on it, and I've dived on it multiple times, and I went back to diving in order to dive on it again in this series. It's impossible to believe that it's entirely a work of nature. And I took a marine biologist there with me who's dived all over the world, and he agreed with me that there's just no way that this thing can be explained as a totally natural phenomenon.
Can we see it, Jeremy?
Graham also points out that while North Bimini is a pretty small island today, it was actually part of a much larger island centuries ago. He added that the island turns up on ancient maps showing that it was much larger than what it is right now.
And one of the mysteries I look into is that on an ancient map, the famous Piri Reis map, drawn by a Turkish admiral in 1513, that Grand Bahama Banks as an above-water island is shown. It is featured on the Piri Reis map. And what do you see running down it but an image of the Bimini Road above water?
Piri Reis, the Ottoman explorer and navigator who drew the map, explained that he had based his drawings on several older source maps he gathered throughout his travels. Most of these maps have now been lost, but they served as inspiration for his books. And Graham believes someone must have been mapping the Earth during the Ice Age that left maps for us all to see just how the planet looked. But what does this all mean for Antarctica? Well, according to Graham, the big icy continent itself also appears on many of these ancient maps. The researcher explained that while conventional information claims that Antarctica was only first discovered in 1820, the continent was actually known to exist much earlier. How early, you ask? Well, how about the 1500s?
During the last ice age, one of the things I find most striking is the presence of Antarctica on ancient maps, because we didn't discover it until 1820, and yet it's on maps drawn in the 1500s with great detail, which again were based on much older source maps that have now been lost to us.
Besides this, Graham also pointed to the Orontius Phineas map, which also shows that Antarctica was indeed present. Orontius Phineas was a mathematician and book illustrator who lived in the late 14th and early 15th century, and in his maps Antarctica is actually present. The people at the time reportedly referred to the continent as the Southern Lands, but the fact remains that Antarctica was truly there. And all this simply begs the question, how on earth did these old guys discover the presence of Antarctica back then when we only found it in 1820? Well, according to Graham, this could be conclusive proof that there was really a civilization that existed before us humans, and which did some mapping before we ever even got on the scene.
And to map the world during the last ice age, one of the things I find most striking is the presence of Antarctica on ancient maps, because we didn't discover it until 1820.
Graham added that while the maps could be a bit confusing because of the different data sources, the fact remains that a civilization could indeed have existed in Antarctica before recorded history began. Operation High Jump and the alien connection. Besides the links between Antarctica and a possible advanced civilization that lived much longer than many of us can even realize, the icy continent has also been linked to alien activity. Now, I know this might sound shocking to you, but stick with me because we're about to go into some really freaky stuff. In August 2022, Joe Rogan hosted Sam Tripoli, a fellow podcaster and comedian, on his show. The two spoke about a myriad of events, but things got really intense when Sam explained the history of one of the United States' most infamous missions, Operation High Jump. Not many know about Operation High Jump, most likely because it was named the United States Antarctic Development Program. The operation lasted for just 9 months between 1946 and 1947, and it brought possible revelations that aliens might literally have been in Antarctica while World War II was going on. Leading the charge for Operation High Jump was Admiral Richard E. Byrd. The admiral was a notable military figure. He graduated from the United States Naval Academy and even fought in World War I, but after the conflict he became an explorer. Byrd made headlines in 1926 when he and Navy Chief Aviation pilot Floyd Bennett became the first ever to complete a flight over the North Pole. Both men were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for their achievement, and when Byrd himself completed the first solo flight over the South Pole, he became the youngest man in American Navy history to ever be promoted to the rank of admiral. This guy was legit, so it was only fitting that he'd be the man to lead such an important mission. With the United States and its allies recently winning World War II, Washington turned its sights on Antarctica. The goal of Operation High Jump was to explore the continent and train military personnel there, with the hopes of eventually turning it into a massive military base. President Harry Truman and the government were looking to establish American dominance over Antarctica, and they chose Admiral Byrd as the man to lead this initial phase. Operation High Jump was a huge endeavor. It comprised 13 warships, 33 aircraft, and about 4,700 troops. It was and still remains the largest Antarctic military expedition to date. But just 9 months following their departure, the adventurers all came back. According to SAM records compiled by Admiral Byrd, showed that the Navy commander had apparently made contact with alien forces and unidentified flying objects.
He basically met with UFOs, Nazi UFOs.
What?
Yes.
Sam pointed out that the Nazis had apparently made a deal with aliens to leverage their advanced technology in World War II, but so far no one actually knows why this wasn't deployed. Now, Sam hasn't been the first person to talk about this. In fact, several other experts do corroborate. Sam said the top brass at Operation High Jump eventually went back to President Truman and told him that there were truly aliens, so he decided to strike a deal with them. The aliens could conduct humane experiments, but they could only do it in secluded places. And guess where those spots were? Trust me, you won't believe it.
And that's where they say Eisenhower made a deal with these aliens, that they could kidnap people and do experiments, but they couldn't just do it anywhere. They had specific places, which were our national forest.
What?
Yeah, dude.
It's crazy to think that our national forests might have been the site of human experiments, but who knows with these guys? And if you're still doubting the fact that aliens could have been in Antarctica all this while, consider this. Back in 2018, a satellite image captured what appeared to have been a condensed travel trail from an aircraft. You know when you look up in the sky and find those trails that follow airplanes around? Exactly. Now, finding an aircraft trail isn't a novelty, we all do it. But what was especially shocking about this trail was that it quite literally ran across the Earth. According to scientists, an aircraft trail that's created would disappear in about 30 minutes tops. Some trails even vanish long before then. For an aircraft to leave a trail that would span the entire length of the Earth and not break up, it would need to travel at a speed of 50,000 miles per hour at the very least. And that in itself is about 10 times faster than the fastest aircraft in the world. 70 years since Admiral Byrd's records were found, it appears that his theory might have been confirmed. Other proofs of ancient civilizations. Now, I know that all of this might be quite a lot to take in. However, it appears to be hard proof that the world as we know it isn't necessarily what it seems, and in more ways than one we're finding different other reasons to show that there must have been a lot of human activity that shaped the planet. The Amazon's first inhabitants. For further proof that there were ancient civilizations in our world, Joe Rogan has also explored other parts of the planet that show the presence of different races of people. One such location is the lush, beautiful Amazon rainforest. The Amazon is known to pretty much everyone in the world right now. The forest plays a significant role in preserving the global ecosystem. Think about it, the Amazon rainforest holds about 76 billion tons of carbon, while the forest also releases about 20 billion tons of water on a daily basis. The forest is also home to unknown species of plants and animals, and it's been referred to by many as the planet's lungs. Interestingly though, it would also appear that the lush and supposedly untapped land in and around the Amazon rainforest didn't just naturally appear. According to Graham Hancock again, the Amazon has actually played host to civilizations that lived in it and thrived there. Years back, Graham appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast where he spoke about the mystery of the Amazon rainforest and the fact that a lot of us still don't know much about the vast expanse of land. According to Graham, the general and conventional knowledge has always been that the Amazon rainforest was an uninhabitable piece of land that humans couldn't enter until about 1,000 years ago when indigenous tribes started to settle around it.
There was a preconception. Human beings couldn't have flourished in the Amazon. It's not a resource-rich area. The soils are poor. It's a difficult area, challenging to get to, very far from the Bering Straits. So the view was that humans hadn't entered the Amazon until about 1,000 years ago. And then gradually, little by little, that view has begun to change. And it's begun to change because of the tragic clearances of the Amazon.
Graham brought up the gradual erosion of the Amazon rainforest due to industrialization and manufacturing processes. As he explained, while these activities are tragic, they've also unearthed secrets of the Amazon that were long held.
And in that cutting down process has emerged things that shouldn't be there at all. For example, evidence that large cities flourished in the Amazon. Enormous cities, which were larger than there was a Spanish explorer who went down the Amazon River system in 1541 to 1542. He was the first European to cross the entire length of South America from west to east along the Amazon. He reported seeing incredible cities, advanced arts and crafts, millions of people, a thriving culture. And 100 years later, when other Europeans got into the Amazon, they couldn't find these cities. So they said, oh, Francisco Orellana, that was his name, made it all up. It was just a fantasy.
Although this Spanish explorer was mocked for his beliefs and what he thought he saw, he's actually been proven right recently. A few years ago, scientists were able to use light-based remote sensing technology, or LiDAR, to digitally deforest the Amazon, and what they discovered was quite shocking. They saw proof and ancient ruins of what seemed like a vast urban settlement around Llanos de Mojos, in part of the rainforest that sits in Bolivia.
If you go to the southeast of the Llanos de Mojos, which is a savanna region in the lowlands of Bolivia, people will tell you of the lomas. Those lomas are mounds that exist over there and that are normally covered by vegetation.
When many of these mounds actually started being investigated, most archaeologists believed they were nothing but heaps of rubbish that had accumulated over the centuries. However, beneath the surface of the ground, researchers found artifacts, graves, and other platforms, all of which is proof that there indeed was a civilization in the Amazon rainforest that was seemingly wiped out.
We found something like 120 graves in that site, and some did have offerings and they were at special locations. So all those data combined show that the society itself was much more complex than anybody had supposed before.
Among the other things that scientists found in the region include evidence of canals, defensive banks, reservoirs, and even conical pyramids. Pyramids? Anyone else sense an Egyptian connection here? The site is the most startling discovery that suggests that the Amazon rainforest wilderness was actually heavily populated, and in some cases, maybe even urbanized. All of this happened long before the recordings of history even began. So who could these people be and what were they doing all this while? The scientists believe the town must have been abandoned around 600 years ago, although it remains unclear what might have caused them to migrate. According to Graham, though, it could be that another culture invaded their land and forced them to skip town.
What happened was that the Spaniards brought smallpox into the Amazon. Smallpox devastated the local population because there was no immunity to it. There was a massive die-off. The cities were deserted. Within 50 years, they were completely overgrown by the jungle, and that's why they were not seen by the explorers who came in 100 years later.
Terra Preta. Another interesting discovery in the Amazon has been Terra Preta. Known by some as Amazonian dark earth, Terra Preta is a form of soil that seems to only be exclusive to the Amazonian basin. Terra Preta is an incredibly fertile form of soil that many scientists have been looking at as a possible way to transform the entire agricultural landscape. However, while scientists are still working on making Terra Preta, it's interesting because no one knows how it really came to be. Well, as you'd expect, Graham has a theory about that too. According to the author, the oldest inhabitants of the Amazon rainforest actually made Terra Preta as a means of feeding themselves because the soil in the rainforest was notoriously bad for producing anything. You know what? Why not hear about it from the man himself?
Those cities are emerging, and we can say that a city like London, which had a population of roughly 50,000 in the 16th century, there were cities of that size all over the Amazon. Wow. Huge numbers of them. And a possible total population of the Amazon that exceeded 20 million people.
What?
Yes, 20 million. This is the latest evidence from the Amazon. And then you ask yourself, how did they do that? How did they feed 20 million people in the Amazon? Because it's a fact, rainforest soils are poor, stuff on it for very long. So how did they feed all these people? The answer was they invented a soil. And that soil has a name. It's called terra preta. Archaeologists refer to it as Amazonian dark earths or Amazonian black earth. It's a man-made soil. It's thousands of years old. It's full of microbes that are not found in adjoining soil. It's based around biochar. And you can take a handful of 8,000-year-old terra preta and you can add it to barren soil, and that soil will instantly become fertile. It's highly sought after in the Amazon, and it explains how they fed these people.
So the discovery of terra preta has basically shown us two things. The first is the fact that the oldest Amazonians were actually able to feed themselves, despite being pretty large in number. However, the second, and perhaps most important, is the fact that these people were so advanced and smart that they were literally able to manipulate their environment to create something artificially. Boy, just imagine the stories these people would have been able to tell if they were still alive today. And if they were smart enough to create their own soil, who knows what other insane stuff they might have created in the past. A cloaking device, maybe. I'm just saying. Antarctica's pyramids and the Egyptians. Back to the subject of Antarctica. The accounts of Admiral Byrd haven't been the only things to point us to a possible alien civilization that might have settled there. In 2016, satellites roaming over the Antarctic region picked up something rather strange. In Antarctica, there seemed to have been a weird shape peeking out from the ice. While the structure was still covered in ice, its head had managed to come out, and as the ice was melting, more of it was on display for the world to see. Although the region wasn't easy to reach, scientists believe that the structure must have been a man-made pyramid that was created at least thousands of years ago. It immediately caused arguments in the scientific community. Many immediately shared their belief that the pyramids were proof of an entire civilization that lived in Antarctica long before anyone else knew it. Scientists are still trying to gather more evidence, so it's still difficult to say. But the closer you look, the more you see. A year after the pyramid was found, a team of scientists at the Alfred Wegener Institute for Polar and Marine Research in Germany traveled to the cold continent to learn more about it. They collected core samples from deep within Antarctica's sea floor, hoping to find more information about the continent, and the logical team essentially found that it's possible Antarctica was more habitable in its earlier times. And while the continent is pretty much a frozen wasteland at this point, it might have been a thriving area where a civilization once settled. The discovery of the pyramid, as well as the accounts from Admiral Byrd, essentially give some credence to people who believe in two theories. One, that aliens lived in Antarctica, and two, that aliens actually built the pyramids in Egypt. Okay, so think about it. To date, no one knows how the pyramids in Egypt were constructed. I mean, we know the Egyptian Empire was powerful and had a lot of labor, but it still doesn't explain some of the crazy structures that those pyramids housed. When you consider that these people were from a time when there was little in the form of technological advancement, it's easy to question how those pyramids were built. But it hasn't stopped people from hypothesizing that they were erected by an advanced alien race that made contact with the ancient Egyptians. For further proof of this, consider the pharaoh's medallion. Discovered years back, the medallion is thought to have been the personal property of Akhenaten, one of the most popular pharaohs in Egyptian history. Akhenaten instituted the worship of the sun god Aten during his rule. This guy was so devoted that he changed his name from Amenhotep IV to Akhenaten. Pretty hardcore, isn't it? Well, when the pharaoh's medallion was eventually found, eagle-eyed observers quickly noted something strange. The medallion apparently depicted an alien right on top of it. There have been a lot of arguments over this medallion. Some claim that it only depicts Akhenaten worshipping the sun god. But how to explain the sun god looking so much like an alien? Could it be that the pharaoh had met an alien and made a medallion to commemorate that fact? Even more, what if this alien was among the ones who inspired the construction of the pyramids? And what if there was an alien race that had settled in Antarctica and built pyramids like the one found in 2016? The Antarctica pyramid is said to be older than the ones in Egypt, so this definitely tracks. It's a long stretch to make, but hey, if there's anything we've all come to learn in this world, it's that nothing is ever impossible. There are several forms of evidence that seemingly claim that the world played host to an advanced civilization that existed long before recorded history began, and all we really have are the questions that can be asked. What do you think, though? Are we really looking at advanced civilizations? Did aliens really make contact with our planet? Let us know in the comments.